There's a guy right now, maybe it's you, sitting in his living room at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. No one's asking him where the remote is. No one's telling him dinner's cold. No one's slamming a door down the hall. The house is quiet, and he's fine with it. Or at least, that's the story he tells himself. I'm Frank, and today we're getting into the head of the Gen X man who lives alone. We'll look at what his life actually looks like, how he got there, and whether he's at peace with it, or performing peace so well even he can't tell the difference anymore. That quiet house isn't just a moment. It's a reality for more men than you might think, and it reveals a bigger shift in how these guys navigate midlife on their own terms. Right now, about 65% of single midlife men in the U.S. live alone. That's according to a study from the National Center for Family and Marriage Research at Bowling Green State University using 2021 census data. 2 out of 3. This isn't some fringe group, it's the majority pattern for men in this stage of life. And it gets more specific when you narrow it down to men between 50 and 59. About 41% of the ones living alone have never been married, not divorced, not widowed, never walked down the aisle. These numbers show a life built around solo living from the start, without the usual family milestones most expect. What stands out is how this has changed over time, pointing to a real turning point that Gen X men are living through right now. That number used to be tiny. In 1970, only about 7% of midlife adults in America had never married. By 2020, it was close to 29%. That's a fourfold jump in 50 years. Something shifted, and Gen X men are sitting right in the middle of that shift. This isn't just a statistic. It's why so many of these guys have routines and homes shaped for one, and why questions about their choices come up from outsiders. It sets the stage for understanding their days, their paths to this point, and the balance they strike between freedom and whatever else comes with the silence. So what does a regular day look like for one of these Gen X men living alone? It depends on who you ask, since they're not all the same person. But many have built a routine that fits them perfectly, starting early in the morning. Coffee gets made exactly the way he wants it, with no one else's taste to consider or compromise on. He checks his phone, not for messages from a partner, but for the news or a group chat with a few friends he's known since high school. This sets a tone of control right from the start, where every small choice reflects a life tuned to his preferences alone, free from the pull of shared expectations. From there, the day moves into work if he's still employed, or a personal project if he's retired, maybe sorting the garage, picking up a side gig, or falling into a YouTube rabbit hole on woodworking, old motorcycles, or military history. Dinner comes whenever it suits him, at 5 p.m. or as late as 9, following a schedule he created himself with no outside input. These moments add up to a structure that's entirely self-directed, turning potential emptiness into a reliable rhythm that keeps the day moving on his terms, without the need to check in or adjust for anyone else. That's the part outsiders often get wrong. They see this man and assume he's missing something essential, mistaking his solid routine for a sign of loneliness. But for a lot of these guys, it's the opposite. They're not sitting around wondering where their life went. They're doing exactly what they want, when they want, with nobody to negotiate with every step. The house is theirs, the money is theirs, the silence is theirs. For some, that silence marks the first real quiet they've had in decades, a hard-won space that feels like freedom rather than lack. This view from inside challenges the easy judgments, pointing us toward how these men ended up here in the first place. Now, how did he get here? That's where it gets interesting, because there's more than one road to this address. Some of these Gen X men never married, and it wasn't some kind of protest or a deep wound. They just didn't. Maybe they spent their 20s and 30s building a career, or they had relationships that lasted years but never crossed into a wedding. Pew Research found that by 2019, 39% of men ages 25 to 54 were unpartnered, not married and not living with someone. That's up from 29% in 1990. A lot of these men were in relationships. They simply never took that legal step. And the longer you wait, the more your life starts to shape itself around living solo. You get good at it. You build a house, literal or figurative, that fits just one person. Then someone comes along and asks, "So why didn't you ever get married?" Like you owe them an explanation. That question highlights how these paths aren't always chosen with fanfare. They form quietly over time, turning independence into something second nature. Then there's the guy who was married, and it ended. He's not bitter about it, or maybe he is. Either way, he's alone now. The research here is rough. A study cited in Psychology Today found that unmarried men between 40 and 60 are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide compared to married men and unmarried women in the same age range. Divorced men specifically are 8 times more likely than divorced women. A lot of men build their entire social world around their partner. She's the one who kept the friendships going, planned the dinners, remembered birthdays. When the marriage ends, that social infrastructure collapses like a house with one load-bearing wall. He's not just losing a wife, He's losing the person who connected him to other people. This shows how solitude can hit differently depending on when it arrives, reshaping not just the home but the whole network that held it together. That's the split. You've got the never-married guy who learned how to be alone years ago, and the divorced guy who's learning it for the first time at 52. Same apartment, very different experience. These paths reveal why living alone isn't one-size-fits-all for Gen X men, even as the quiet house looks the same from the outside. And there's another group nobody talks about much, who've been living alone longer than anybody. Gay Gen X men. They've been living alone longer than anybody, and nobody talks about them much. LGBTQ's older adults are twice as likely to live alone and 4 times as likely to have no children, according to the American Society on Aging. Gay and bisexual men, specifically, are 2 times more likely to live alone than straight men, based on research published through the National Institutes of Health. A lot of these men came up during the AIDS crisis, lost entire friend groups in their 20s and 30s, and had to rebuild social circles from scratch. Some live alone, not because they chose to, but because the people they would have grown old with didn't make it. The AARP's 2025 loneliness study found that 46% of LGBTQ+ respondents said they were lonely, higher than the overall rate for people their age. That number carries weight, showing how these paths to solitude carry unique layers of loss that shape the quiet even more deeply. Now, here's a question worth sitting with. Is the Gen X man who lives alone just an introvert? A lot of people assume that, if he's alone, he must prefer it, and honestly, some do. But the data says something more complicated. AARP released a study on Gen X men and friendship in early 2026, and the results were striking. 95% of men said friends are essential to a happy, healthy life. So it's not that they don't care about people, they absolutely do. The issue is how they connect, or don't. Men in the study were less likely than women to volunteer, attend regular gatherings, or join a community group. Only 19% of men belong to a local organization compared to 24% of women. And the friendships they do have? The study called them high passion, low vulnerability. They'll talk about sports, politics, music, and current events for hours. But they won't talk about the fact that they haven't had a real conversation with another human being in 11 days. These guys have friends, a lot of them have had the same ones for 20 or 30 years. But they don't call. They don't text beyond logistics. They don't say, hey, I've been feeling off lately. Can we talk? The AARP researchers put it this way. Men connect shoulder to shoulder and women connect face to face. Men do things together. Women talk to each other. Both are valid, but when you live alone and your shoulder-to-shoulder buddy is 3 states away, the connection fades to a group chat nobody reads. So are they lonely? Some are. AARP's December 2025 loneliness report found that 42% of men ages 45 and older are lonely now, up from 34% in 2018. Adults in their late 40s and 50s are hit harder. Almost half, 46% of people aged 45 to 59 reported feeling lonely. But loneliness goes down as people age. The older they get, the less lonely they report being. That's a pattern across 3 rounds of AARP surveys since 2010. The Cigna Loneliness in America report from 2025 found that 60% of Gen X adults qualify as lonely, higher than boomers. This data layers up to reveal men who value connection but struggle to keep it alive on their own terms. What does the Gen X man who lives alone actually do with his time? This is where the stereotype falls apart. People picture a guy on a couch watching TV in the dark. And yeah, maybe that's somebody. But a lot of these men have hobbies that eat up hours, and they don't need an audience for it. Woodworking, restoring cars, cooking elaborate meals for one person and not apologizing for it. Fishing alone at 6 a.m., running. Lifting weights at a gym where he knows nobody's name and prefers it that way. Playing guitar in a room where no one tells him to turn it down. Growing a garden that produces more tomatoes than one man could ever eat, and then giving them away to neighbors he barely talks to. These pursuits fill the day on his terms, turning time into something productive and personal rather than empty. They show how solo living can support a full inner world, even as the data on loneliness reminds us that connection still matters. Gen X men who live alone tend to split into 2 camps on this. There's the one who fills every waking hour with activity, work, projects, exercise, something always going, because stillness makes him nervous. And there's the one who sits with the silence like it's an old friend. He reads, he watches a documentary, he stares out a window for 20 minutes and calls it thinking. Both of these guys are managing the same thing, a life with no built-in accountability partner. Nobody asking, what are you doing today? Nobody caring if he skips the gym or eats cereal for dinner. For some guys, that freedom is the whole point. For others, it's the thing that slowly unravels them. This split highlights how the absence of daily negotiation shapes their days, either empowering them or quietly testing their self-reliance. And then there's the question that hangs over all of it. Does he love it or hate it? The honest answer for most of them is both. On a Saturday afternoon when the weather's right and the house is clean, and there's a cold drink and a good game on, there's nothing better. He's the king of a kingdom built for one. No compromises, no arguments about paint colors or thermostat settings or whose turn it is to take out the trash. On those days, he wouldn't trade it for anything. But there's the other side, the side he doesn't post about. A bad medical test with nobody in the waiting room. A holiday that goes by without a phone call. The moment right before sleep when the house makes a noise and there's no one to say, "Did you hear that?" That's where the difference between being alone and feeling alone shows up. This duality captures the real push and pull, where freedom meets its limits in the quiet moments that demand someone else. A lot of Gen X men have spent so many years practicing independence that they don't know how to ask for company. They've been handling things by themselves since they were kids. Asking for help feels like failure, and failure was never an option in the house they grew up in. He grew up in a time when self-reliance wasn't encouraged. It was mandatory. You figured things out. You didn't ask for directions, literally or emotionally. You handled your own problems. And that wiring doesn't just disappear at 55. It runs underneath everything. It's the reason he can live alone for 15 years and genuinely not think anything's wrong. And it's the reason that when something is wrong, when the loneliness gets heavy, or the health scare gets real, or the silence stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like a cage, he still won't pick up the phone. The AARP friendship study found something that captures this perfectly. Men's friendships often last 20 years or more. They hold on to the same guys from high school, from the military, from their first job, but they don't maintain the connection. The wire goes dead. Not because they stopped caring, but because nobody taught them how to keep it live. Women will call to check in. Men wait for a reason to call, and sometimes years go by without one. A lot of you have been in the comments sharing stories about your childhood, your parents, stuff you never connected until now. That's actually what pushed me to sit down and write a book about all of it. Psychology of Gen X. It's in the description. If you're the guy on the couch right now, and the house is quiet, that's the Gen X man living alone. He's not broken. He's built that way, assembled by a specific set of circumstances from his upbringing and the shifts around him. The way he moves through life reflects every bolt and screw. He can fix a leaky faucet, invest his own money, cook himself a steak, and go weeks without a meaningful human conversation. And he'll call it freedom. Maybe it is. That quiet living room at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday captures it perfectly. No one's asking for the remote, no dinners going cold, no doors slamming. It's his space, fully his, shaped by routines he set, paths he took, and a self-reliance that was never just encouraged but required. But freedom without connection has a shelf life. And at some point, the question stops being, do you like living alone? And starts being, does anyone know you're here?